We've seen it all over the news and social media.
Well, New York City's migrant crisis is
migrants for dozens of robberies all across New York City.
Many of them migrants, according to police.
A migrant robbery rings
about a wider criminal network involving
migrant community.
One person was stabbed outside the migrant shelter.
The manhunt for a young migrant accused of opening fire on police near Times Square.
A fight that turned into a melee outside the migrant shelter there.
How did these migrants end up on the wrong side of the law?
Police say a 17-year-old was stabbed in the back at 42nd and 8th. A police source tells Pix 11 News that the victim may be a migrant.
My hometown, New York City, is under siege. Transnational criminal gangs have flooded the streets and planted their flag in practically every single corner of the 5 boroughs. Exercising complete disregard for people residing in the Big Apple, these remorseless criminals are successfully running a campaign of brazen and wanton violence all over the city. These migrant gangsters are part of a 2,700-member criminal organization that have already solidified their position as key players in New York City's underworld, quickly establishing themselves as the city's new up-and-coming criminal group, not to be ignored. So, who are they? And why does this situation taking place in New York City right now seem eerily similar to an event that took place in South Florida during the 1980s? Let's find out. I'm your host, Tony Handsome, and this is Corruption Connection.
Quien no tenga sangre revolucionaria, quien no tenga una mente que se adapte a la idea de una revolución, quien no tenga un corazón que se adapte al esfuerzo y al heroísmo de una revolución, no los queremos, no los necesitamos.
On April 15, 1980, Communist President Fidel Castro announced that he would open the port of Mariel in Cuba, and any Cuban wishing to leave the island and seek asylum elsewhere was welcome to leave. Overnight, a mass exodus of Cubans left the island aboard fishing boats headed to South Florida. Between April and October of that year, approximately 125,000 Marielitos, as they were called, flooded the streets of South Florida. However, it was soon learned that Castro had intentionally filled the boats headed to South Florida with Cuba's most undesirables. Drug addicts, prostitutes, criminals, the mentally ill, all had a one-way ticket from Mariel to Miami.
Lázaro Estevez told the INS he was in jail because he was unemployed. In fact, he was a hardcore criminal with the scars to prove it. A tattoo on his chest with the inscription, "Friends are those who are dead." A true product of the Castro jails.
The effects of the migration were felt immediately in Miami. Areas like Little Havana saw an 86% spike in major crimes following the arrival of the Marielitos, prompting the police department to issue a state of emergency.
This benevolent association has warned that the criminal justice system can no longer protect the public and urged people to arm themselves.
From 1999 to 2013, Venezuela was under the rule of socialist President Hugo Chavez. After years of deficit spending and price control, as well as an economic war against Venezuela's upper class, Chavez effectively destroyed Venezuela's economy, leading to rising inflation and a severe socio-economic crisis. Around 2010, as the failed leadership of the Venezuelan nation unfolded, a sort of quasi-government began to develop in its absence that would have a significant impact on Venezuela and the United States in the years to come. Violence and lawlessness amongst the migrants has become all too commonplace here in New York City. Every day, news headlines report another violent instance regarding these migrants, ranging from assault and robbery to organized theft and attempted murder. Out of 175,000 migrants arriving to New York from the U.S.-Mexico border, more than 2/3 have arrived from the economically strife country of Venezuela. Embedded amongst the mostly hardworking Venezuelan migrants that came to this country to pursue a better life is a criminal gang. Law enforcement officials state is one of the fastest growing criminal organizations in the world. El Tren De Aragua, or the Aragua Train, is the largest criminal organization in Venezuela. Involved in numerous criminal activities such as armed trafficking, drug trafficking, kidnapping, extortion, retail theft, and murder for hire. El Tren De Aragua has its criminal tentacles all over South America, as well as the U.S. Run-ins with law enforcement have been documented in such places as Chicago and Florida, and its apparent has expanded its operations to the Big Apple.
The brutal Venezuelan gang called Tren De Aragua had made it across the border into New York.
Kidnapping, robbing, that is what they do. They do it there, they're going to do it here. According to several fellow migrants, the gang preys upon its own. The first victims are their fellow Venezuelans, insinuating the gang tries to recruit new gang members among their own migrant communities.
Police say a ringleader of the group has been recruiting migrants who recently arrived in the city to do his dirty work.
In some instances, gang members will send out mass texts through WhatsApp saying, "Need phones, I have dollars, I'm available, go get them," prompting some migrants to act out of desperation and snatch phones from victims all over the 5 boroughs.
Hey everyone, if you're enjoying this video, please click the like button below and make sure to subscribe to the channel.
If you would like to support the channel further, please hit the super thanks icon, which can be found below each video or in the comment section below. If anyone is interested in becoming a connected member, click the join button to gain access to rare pictures of organized crime figures, untold stories, and exclusive behind the scenes footage.
Thank you. Now let's get back to Corruption Connection.
The violent tendencies amongst these migrants knows no bounds, as was demonstrated by a 15-year-old kid who recently arrived from Venezuela. While stopped by security for shoplifting outside of JD Sports on 42nd Street, the 15-year-old pulled out a pistol and began firing, striking a tourist in the leg and squeezing off 2 rounds at responding officers. In another act of defiance, and probably the most brazen example of the gang's disregard for the law, 2 individuals identified as members of the Tren De Aragua gang were arrested along with 2 others in an attack on NYPD officers in Times Square. Their leader, nicknamed El Niño Guerrero, or Warrior Boy, has escaped from his prison cell at the Torrecon Penitentiary back in 2012. Compared to Pablo Escobar's La Catedral prison in Colombia in the 1980s, Torrecon Penitentiary has afforded El Niño Guerrero with every luxury needed in order to facilitate his criminal empire from behind bars. With the gang's reach and established connections throughout North America, it's just the beginning of what's to come from them. In a recent report by Bloomberg News, lawmakers have urged the Biden administration to designate El Tren De Aragua as a transnational criminal organization in a new effort to curb the gang's expansion into the United States. In response to the uptick in subway crime, which also can be contributed to the influx of new migrants into the 5 boroughs, New York City has deployed 750 National Guard troops throughout the transit system in order to combat the increase in violence. A decision which seemed to have very little effect on curbing violence on the train. While in the process of making this documentary, a man was shot in the head while aboard an A train at the Hoyt-Schermerhorn station in Brooklyn. Is there a solution to the problem sweeping across the nation? Or is New York City destined to be like Miami in the 80s? Paradise lost.
Any emigration to a country causes some sort of chaos.
So what's your opinion? Is New York City destined for the same fate as Miami was in the 1980s? Leave us your thoughts, comments, and questions in the comment section below. As always, I'm your host, Tony Handsome, and this is Corruption Connection.